Hello and welcome to Poems On. This is the second part of the 9th show in the series. Continues the conversation that I had with my guests, David Mason and Callie Conan-Davies from last month. So we'll start right in. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to the 4th round here.
Talk
about it. Put it up when you're ready.
This one is called Prayer. Another prayer. Again, we're staying with the cold because we do have cold here. It's not the kind of North American cold, but we do have cold, and very low light. We have days in the middle of winter where it hardly emerges. I mean, you seem to go from dawn straight into afternoon, and it's, the sun is so low, it doesn't really seem to peak into any midday. It just becomes a grey afternoon, and then it's night again. So so weather. I mean, weather is what we're talking about. Weather and being inspired by weather. So nature as weather, as the weather we're in, and mood as weather as how it affects our mood, and what we see and how we see into things. So this is called Prayer, and it really came out of the weather. Prayer. In all things there is a poison, and there is nothing without a poison. It depends only upon the dose, whether a poison is poison or not. Paracelsus. For a few short, cold days, nothing but a mist, impossibly soft, goes by. A paintbrush of blue trails over the boulders, under the ferns, about my soul. My mother was poisoned, and I knew poison meant death. This, it turns out, is not true. There's a lot a little poison can do. This colour at the edge of mist on my little dead-end road performs the absence of world so silently, so fleshy pearl, making me a little bit immune, a little bit more creature-ish too.
Wonderful reading. What you did with your voice is terrific. No, because you slendered it down.
Yeah.
And the middle of that poem, the silent explosion in this middle of that poem that begins with my mother, that those two lines, and then how you come back from those two lines.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful turn, because the poem takes you, it drops you somewhere, and then it picks you up again and brings you back.
Yeah.
And you did all that with your voice too when you were reading, which is good. I try to have as guests people who are not only strong writers but strong readers.
Yeah.
So yeah. I appreciate your technique. Thank you.
It's just that it's isn't it? I mean, it's just all about voice. I mean, it is the voice. It is sound, and I want to talk about that soon too. I mean, it is about sound. When I mean, I know that a lot, like with the Crow poem, it's very visual. Like I'm witnessing with my eyes, the sense organ being used as the eye. You're watching, looking. But the truth is, when I write, when I'm in that space, I'm not looking. The eye is not the organ that I use. It's the ear. It's all about sound. I'm listening. When I'm writing, even if I'm looking at something that I'm trying to describe, I'm actually listening. I'm listening.
Yes.
It's sound to me is primal. So that
Yeah, well, you're preaching to the choir, sister, as we like to say here in America.
It's like, so what we're dealing with here with poetry is silence and sound.
Yes.
And also,
the binary. That's what it's all about.
there's another binary in that poem, which is life and death. And
yes.
The knife blade that existence is between the two. Poison is only poison if there's too much of it, right? And a mother is poison, but you don't die of it, of that poison. You live it, and you're made stronger. And the mist makes the world disappear, but in that disappearance of the world, you feel more alive and creature-ish. You know, that you feel the animal self coming alive again. So it's a poem that navigates between states of being. And I think a lot of art is about that. You know?
And it's also, I mean, one of the ideas to it, of course, is like inoculation, to become the whole principle that Paracelsus is talking about, is that, and the whole science of what's it called? Vaccines.
Yes, you get a little bit. You got
to get a little bit to get you got to know it. You got to have experience of it to be able to live with it, to be able to live with this and that to me is just so eminently sensible and understandable that we shouldn't be trying to push ourselves away from the things that are dangerous or that hurt, or that those things we need a bit of. We need a bit of.
You need a bit of confrontation, a bit of conflict, a bit of. You need to be disturbed. You need to have things happen to you. You need to have things confront you.
So that's the thing. Poison, you know, meant death. I mean, poison, death. But it's over time you realize, well, hang on, if that's not really true, there's a lot.
It's more subtle than that. Well, okay, I want to take what you said, and I've certainly been on record for a very long time as saying that for me, the sound is, I mean, as a musician, I try to get as much music into my poetry as I can, and I always say that for me, the experience of the poem really ought to be my performance of it. That you should hear me read it more than just see it on the page. But I'm going to go one step further and say this, because you're absolutely right that you're writing in the pool of awareness of your ear. But I actually will go a little bit further than that, and I do this. It comes from writing songs that I will sing myself. That I also like to use words, obviously in my lyrics, but also in the poetry, that are physically pleasurable to produce in your head. So with your lips and your tongue, you're creating something there's a positive pleasure just in the physical production of the sound. And if you can connect that to then the musical qualities of the rising and falling and the rhythmical properties of how you read and how you phrase, and then wed that to the meaning of what you're trying to do, then you're happening on three levels. And my favorite ones are the ones where I'm able to do that more. And my less favorite ones are where I'm only able to do it a little. So
well, that actually makes the best transition to my next poem, which is called Rhapsody in Blue. But just to say something about this, you know, you're a real musician. Chrissy is now playing guitar and has written her first song. She wrote a really good song for a friend's birthday last weekend. She sang it up the road and her daughter Rain and I joined in. We all sang together, and it was beautiful. It's a real song. She's written a real song, and I've written for you. I've written for composers, and I've written opera libretti and stuff. So we do share this interest in the interface of song and poetry. You know, so I've loved Gershwin, and I've loved Gershwin's Rhapsody, but I've loved that phrase, Rhapsody in Blue. I think as a teenage boy, I felt my life was a kind of rhapsody in blue. I felt like I was blue. I was a blue guy, and teenagers often feel blue, right? And in fact, the first journal I ever kept when I was working on ships in Alaska had written on the cover Rhapsody in Blue. And
wow.
And so somehow or another, this absolutely illogical, unconscious association of words and music has been with me since I was a tiny, tiny kid. I've never lost that impulse. I'm just untrained. That's in terms of music. I need to start learning a musical instrument. Anyway, Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue is urban, right? And he's got the idea of the blues behind that piece of music, and my Rhapsody in Blue is not urban. My Rhapsody in Blue is rural. It's Tasmanian, and I've got blue in a different way. But this is a poem that also moves through different registers as it goes along. By the way, I don't know whether I should say it, but I will say it. The first line is simply riffing off another poet's first line. One of my favorite Australian poets, after Chrissy, is the great Les Murray, who just died last year. And usually the first poem, usually in collected poems editions of his works, begins with the line, "It began at dawn with fighter planes." And it's this unbelievable kinetic poem about the Japanese bombardment of Darwin in World War II, the attack on Australia, you know? It's a great poem. It's a hell of a poem. But I'm just riffing for no good reason off that line by Les when I start this poem.
There we
Rhapsody
go.
in Blue. To say it began at dawn is not quite true. It began in the struggle of night escaping dreams, when the bounded world encountered infinite space. Out of doors, the shyest creatures moved under the high holy vault and Milky Way, bringing their young to the fresh grass, the spring. The night was blue, and the unblue moon rode high in a calm sky, and the gum trees hardly moved, and the dreamer tossed in his blue duna, turned in the lathe of his wishes and fears. And when he woke, his own branched hand bent toward him in the sun, streaming through the gums from over the hills. Blue filled him then, from his eyes to his spine. An inlet of sea he followed with waking eyes, an island rising and falling, waking and sleeping, all the way out to the Tasman Sea. Next stop, forever. Next stop, the albatrossing swell, the seal rocks and dolphins weaving in the waves. To rise in the blue world is to fear for its dying and cling to the one day like a shipwrecked sailor. Remember the distant sneer of politics, unending sneer and grimace, the demagogue and the mob and the burn it all down mentality, a static in air, a crackle of codes blown clear, where the swallow leads the eye in an upward curve, and the cockatoo scratches the air, and the air goes soft, and it scratches and softens above the fairy wrens feeding in the grass. For there is work to be done. There are stones to be moved, and there is only a day, this day of the endlessness, day of the blue.
Wow, baby. That's beautiful.
There's a lot of music in that.
I was just gonna say, it's almost like you're dancing to it.
It's lyric. I mean, that's some powerful lyric language. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, you can't not move your body when hearing you do that. You just can't help not move.
Yeah, and like you say, the register changes. I mean, again, you read it so wonderfully, because you've got to. This is really a poem that you can't rush through. You've got to linger.
Yeah.
And you let it breathe. You know, it was a wonderful performance. You know, and you know, as I always say, you know, not every strong poet is a strong reader, but I like it when they happen in the same person. So I got a couple of you here, and I'm not going to let you go. So
I think, see, when people use the word when that something, you know, affects them emotionally, they say, oh, that was so moving. Well, to me, I love a poem that is literally moving, that makes me move physically, that is moving. It fills my body and it moves me. It moves me.
Yep.
Because moving is the great thing. Moving is the great thing.
Well, you know, a lot of times we talk about athletes that are great. They're great athletes from the neck down, which means that, you know, their bodies are the ones that have the talent, but their minds are kind of absent and they don't really understand what, you know, what they're doing. But the opposite is also true, that there are people who are so much in their own heads that and there are a lot of poets producing poems that are really head alone poems. And really, I always like to say, I'm trying to write with my knees. I'm trying to write with my whole body. And it should come out, and it should come out because that's where it should come from.
Yeah. Do you know the closest the art form that for me feels the closest to poetry, to writing poetry, is dance.
Is dance.
It's dance. Poetry to me is dance. That's the two allied arts, is poetry and dance. Yeah.
I feel the same way. And one of the reasons why I've always been drawn, at least once I attained my majority, because I wrote a little free verse when I was in college. Well, I've always been drawn to metric poetry, is that just as the gravity draws the dancer back to the earth. So in other words, you achieve a freedom, but it's in a zone that's always grounded. So for me, the rhythm is the ground that I keep trying to play around above.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So wow, that's a terrific poem. As Dana Gioia would say, he loves to say terrific.
Terrific. That's beautiful.
Wow. Yeah, no, thank you. That's a good one. All right, well, I'm going to once again draw from the horizons that you guys have been dealing with. I'm going to pull the lens way down to the things that I held in my hand when I was a boy, which is to say the pods of the milkweed that I found growing in the yard behind the house. This is called splitting the pod. And as I said before, I see nature as a metaphor. I see myself in nature as, you know, as a metaphor. And so this is an extended metaphor about identity. Splitting the pod, as though I were a new pod of the milkweed, split open by an eager child, exposed to whim and wind and changing light of day. My edges weep and sticky up the fingers of the world, whose wish to wash itself clean of me will have to wait. I dry in open air my seedlings lined up, dark and slicked down, brooding in a fuselage which will not keep, but can't remain itself, and fly. In time, the downy tufts will soften, fluff up, and assume their natural form to parachute along the moving breeze and drift to altogether somewhere else.
That's it.
Terrific.
Yeah.
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 I'm really struck by, you were talking earlier about the atmosphere of negativity and grievance in contemporary discourse, and
Yes.
the way in which we're having such a hard time getting out of it. And among all the grievances we see in the world these days are all sorts of proscriptions about how you should use language and metaphor.
Oh, yeah.
You know, you shouldn't try to write from someone else's point of view. You shouldn't look at the world in this way or that way. And there may be specific instances where you think something doesn't work, but those broad proscriptions strike me as being really foolish, really dumb. So when
it's dangerous too. You got to be free.
When I hear people saying you shouldn't compare your mental states to things you see in nature, I just think that's one of the dumbest things I've ever heard in my life. There's somehow or another the pathetic fallacy, to use Ruskin's term, the way we project our emotions onto the world outside, that there's something unnatural about that. That is the most natural thing in the world. That means we are related. That means we are a part of the things we hold in our hands and the things we touch and whatnot. And so I think the pathetic fallacy or the metaphorical aspect of the poem works beautifully. Absolutely natural. Just like the bristlecone pine.
Right?
I mean, it's doing the same thing.
And
sure. I mean, we are a part of nature. We're in nature. Nature is in us. It's only the denial of our nature that leads us to that gets us in trouble.
That's right.
You know, and the kind of prescriptions you're talking about are just another extension of the prevailing attitude that it's okay for us to tell other people how to live and how to think and what's okay and what's not okay, as though we were any better than or different from them. That's assuming a kind of proprietary excellence that individually we do not possess. So, wow.
There's some beautiful sounds in that one, Al. I just love the whim and wind and changing light of day. I love whose wish to wash itself clean of me will have to wait. There's some gorgeous sounds through that, and coming down to that line of just being completely moved on into somewhere you can't know. That reminds me of, you know, like Auden, all together elsewhere, vast herds of reindeer move across.
Yes. Yeah, well, it probably, that was somewhere, you know, that bubbled up out of the pool, probably.
Yeah. I mean, that whole idea, I mean, that's another, silently and very fast. Yeah, that's just, but I mean, that's the idea, isn't it? That's another thing about it's, I like nature for me is to be in within and around something that I don't understand. It's the mystery. It's the mystery of it that you don't know. I don't write ever or even think to know anything. I feel like especially when writing a poem, that I'm unknowing, that the whole movement of the poem is a process of unknowing, which will bring me finally to somewhere that I can't possibly ever know. And that feeling of being unknowable in the mystery. That's what I'm always looking for. No explanation, but more mystery.
Yeah, I think that's the most reliable way to realizing our best inner natures. I don't recall who said the quote, but I post a quote on my Facebook page every morning, and sometime last year I posted this quote. It is the job of the artist to always deepen the mystery.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Good.
I agree.
Yeah.
I
So
agree.
you gotta find it and you gotta accept it, and then
Yeah.
you can work with it.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
I think that's why literature is kind of civilizing. That is to say, to learn to read is to learn to participate in mystery, and to learn to be able to say that meaning is not one thing. Meaning is multiple. Meaning is a field of possibilities, as an old friend of mine in Ireland used to say. And I think one of the disappointing aspects of a lot of contemporary discourse about the arts is that people are insisting that they have absolute knowledge. They know the absolute truth, and that's just dumb. It's just dumb. It's a barbaric thing to say.
Yeah.
And
Well, it's also
art
arrogant.
involves us in a more patient way of residing with the world, living with the world, and bearing witness to the world without assuming.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, without assuming that we're the perfect instruments of purification.
Yeah.
If you think about engaging with form, any form, and it doesn't have to be writing poetry, because there's a form to all the arts, whatever it is that you're doing. In order for you to arrive at any kind of skill and eventually at any kind of mastery, you have to begin by what I call humbling yourself to the form, which means you start accepting that you don't know how to engage with the form, and you're going to learn as you go, which is, Chrissy, kind of what you said in your last comment. And it's by doing that that you begin to develop some strength in working with form. And I don't see how it's possible to begin that way and forget how important it is to keep your sense of humility about what it is to begin anything.
Yeah, I mean, we're always failing all the time, and living with failure is a big part of being an artist. And Blake says somewhere that there's no mastery, there's only practice. We're just practicing, right?
Yeah, that's what
we're practicing.
All art is practice, said Blake.
Yeah.
Yes.
All art is practice. It's not like you practice it and right, today I'm going to make the work of art. No.
The moment you think you're a master, you're gonna write the worst thing you've ever written.
Well, what keeps me, one of the things that's great about being a musician, particularly being the kind of musician that I've tried to be, is that I every day I play the same scales that I learned when I was 8 years old.
Yeah. Yes.
They're not more advanced.
No,
I'm still doing them.
Yeah.
And they're part of what keeps me able to explore other things, is to never lose your hold on the fundamentals and where you were when you began. Was it Beckett that said, fail again, fail better?
Yeah. But that's another way of thinking about that's the idea of the scales of repeating. That's another thing that I think that if you're really living in nature and just you get out of the house, what you're doing is and what you're doing with the scales is you are recognizing every single day when you wake up again the tradition.
Yeah.
There's a tradition. You are locating yourself and you are listening to the past, to the echoes, the way this has always been done. And nature, being in the world, being in it, does that to you. I love the sound word, resound, resound. So if poetry is listening, and we are listening to what we are listening to is sound, then we are also listening to the repetitions in nature, and nature repeats these sounds all the time, like those bird songs. It's repeating. And if you are living in the sound and listening to the sound that's always been, the world is resounding.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I love that word, resound. The world can never be dead. It's resounding, it's echoing, it's taking you back to help you hear what is now in the clicking of sticks and wind in the trees. These are repetitive sounds. These are making patterns all the time. They're patterning us. And I think that's what nature is. It's to be in the patterning. That's what we're doing. We're patterning. See,
you can look at it as a kind of what we do when we repeat things in religious framework, when we're doing in a ceremonial way, staying in touch with the first things.
Yeah.
That it's a kind of ceremony.
Yeah.
And I feel that way. Pablo Casals used to say every morning he got up and played part of one of the Bach suites for solo cello to as a morning blessing on the day and on his house.
Yeah. Well, you can do the same thing just by opening your window and listening to a bird, just listening to hear the first small bird.
And according to what Elizabeth Bishop said, what the birds say is repeat, 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 revise, revise, revise.
That's great.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Terrific.
Yeah. So I was thinking that.
I'm sorry, go ahead. I was going to say, we're at the point of the last go round.
Let's go.
So whenever you're ready.
Here we go. This final one. The final one.
You want to say
yes.
anything to put it up?
No, I'm just going to say it. Let's go. This is called At Oyster Cove.
Oh, yes.
And because speaking of repetition, what we're talking about, what nature involves us in, just implicitly, inherently, is myth making.
Sure.
Storytelling, myth making, meaning. There was a seal killed by the old men up to their new tricks, the dead water below the salmon pens. The tide that usually moves all things along kept bringing it back to the same spot, rolling it over the pebbles by the rickety dock. The big body, dark and heavy as the sea, lodged in the cove for 6 hours or more each day, and I would sit with it. I would pagan pray with smoke and flame that it would return again the next day, and it did. And each time there was less of it. Some gone to the silver gulls flying, some drifting down to the narrow fish in the sleepless dark. One day, a woman found me there and told how she longed in her loneliness to be wedded to the sea, to put on a seal dress and walk down an aisle of waves. She painted pictures like this and showed them to me. At first I thought, a creature like me. It didn't take long for the skeleton to emerge. Each day I picked from the rocks another vertebra, another rib come clean. She came again and looked at my heap of bones, and I offered them. But her eyes were on the seal's head. You keep the scaffolding, she said, all of it. I only want the skull. If you get it, will you give it to me? I couldn't say no, although I spoke it in my marrow. The soft body is a cloak, a curtain. And when the dark engine quits, the body opens without regret, disowns itself by way of dissolution. It happened in tide time that the seal was broken. The wave woman could have been the wind. By then, only a fierce tendon kept the head to the housing of the heart. It is harder than you think to part them. But I could tell when the moment was right, when the skull was the only bright thing in the sinking day, the twilight of blues and sea crows. So I pulled, and it hurt. And the spaces around the jawbone swirled with the song of where I found it. For the skull is stronger than a promise, and white as a wedding.
Wow. So after 4 poems, you finally got another person into the poem.
Well, what is this person? What is this figure? What is this figure? I don't want to explain it, but there are figures and presences. I think that to say that you're alone in nature is just not true, because once you're out there, you're surrounded by figures, and I can only describe it as mythic. It's a mythic experience. You are connected and reconnected and resounding with myth. Maybe it's very strong in Australia, but I felt it in the West as well of America. I felt it very strongly in America, the sense of presences, of voices. And that's why I like to walk alone, because I can hear them, I can listen to them.
And even if you actually have an encounter with another human being,
you can transform.
Who argues with you about this seal corpse and who wants the head, as it were.
What is ownership? what is ownership?
Also,
how can you own?
Who is that person?
Yeah.
Who is that person?
Yeah.
Greek poetry is full of the possibility that when you encounter another person, you're actually encountering a god.
A god,
that's
yes.
I like to leave it at that rather than give any.
And is this a witch?
Like that.
Is it a god? Is it a human being?
Who is asking you to give what you don't want to give?
Right.
That makes you lie. That makes you speak falsely because you know you don't mean what you say. I mean, that what I love most is the fierceness of nature. I love fierceness. I don't like softness and easiness. I like fierceness, and really, when nature is dying, nature is all about death to me. It gives us great lessons. These are where the great lessons in what we are fleshy things that dissolve and die and change into something else. That's what it is. That's what it is for me. That's what nature is for me. It's the death teacher. It's the it's what the ancients called
the life teacher.
The life teacher,
because it's the same thing.
It is the Liber Creaturarum, the book of the world, as they said. This is where it is. This is the great book. This is where the learning is, the stories are, the voices are.
That's what Keats said too. He said, the world is my horn book. The world, I learn by rubbing up against the world. That's how I learn.
Yeah. Yeah, because the truth is, it's just like in Hamlet, it's the skull, and the skull is just such a beautiful thing. And I mean, I have that skull now. This happened.
She has the seal skull.
I mean, this is actually true. But I had to wait.
Although I'm the one who yanked it off the seal.
I had to wait. You always have to wait for a voice to emerge for a poem. You can't just say what happened. That's not a poem. Telling anecdotes is not a poem. You have to, again, it's the sound of the voice, which can hold or carry a container that carries the experience is a voice. And you have to wait for the voice. You can have an experience, an event happens to you, and you can get the experience, but for a poem, you have to hear a voice.
Okay, so as Dave points out, the encounter may be with a god.
Yeah.
Or a witch.
Yeah, or another way of forming the concept is the encounter with the doppelganger.
Yes.
That you're encountering something which is both you and not you.
Absolutely, Al. Perfect. Yes.
So that's what I felt when
it's a
when the no is said and withheld simultaneously.
At the same time. Exactly.
That's what I was thinking. So
it's the tension. The tensions are within us. The tensions are there. They're within. Yeah. The doubleness is absolutely true. Yeah. Yeah.
It's
double
it's
vision.
it is very mythic. It's very mythic.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'll tell you, the other thing that struck me as you were reading, and I didn't notice it when I was reading it to myself, is how extraordinarily patient you are in these contexts where you will sit and watch the caught bird for hours. You'll sit all day until the body of the seal comes back diminished. You know, you have a strong sense of connection to witnessing.
Yeah.
You don't give up the possibility of something coming out of the experience.
Yeah.
You know, you're not. You know what I'm saying? You're not just not just hi ho. I've been here 15 minutes. Now I'll go have lunch.
No,
You're that far into it that you're listening for what's going to come from it.
Yeah.
So that I mean, I salute you. That takes real tenacity.
Time is a thing, isn't it? Time is just so
Chrissy
relevant
is
to people.
remarkable. She used to go down to the beach in Oregon and just spend hours with the birds.
12 hours, the whole tide time. Nothing happens until you've been out there at least 3 hours. Nature does take time. It's got all the time in the world itself.
My masculine tendency, I suppose, is to go out and work.
Yeah,
I go out and cut.
His idea of being in nature is to go out and chop the wood, and
I go cut wood.
He has to have a reason to be there.
Well,
I've got no reason, but you do like to have a reason to be out there.
I like to work.
He likes to have a purpose, but I am utterly purposeless, Al. I have no purpose, but to just be. My whole purpose is to be empty.
Yeah, but also your purpose is to be connected.
Yeah, well, to receive.
You're not letting go of the rope. You're connected, and I think it's an important. That's an important lesson that's got to come out of somewhere in the things that we write. That what you just said. Nothing happens until you've been there, during the first 3 hours. There are so many lessons in life that only come to us if we are as patient as you are in those situations. And we live in a culture that is so far away from that patience that I quake with fear that no one will live long enough to learn any of those lessons. Because they're just too impatient. That's where we're headed. And I don't like where we're headed.
No. And see, I love I years and years ago, uni days, I've studied Lawrence, and I'll never forget when I first read Lawrence say, you have to wait like a seed waits. And I just went, oh. Do you know how long some seeds wait? Imagine if you just gave up.
Years.
No, some take years, years. And some of them only come alive when they're burnt, like so much of Australian, you know, flora does, just burns. But yeah, wait like a seed waits. That's how I taught my daughter that. To me, it was just the most important thing. I wanted her to know, to understand that this life, for it to reveal itself to you, takes patience. And that means waiting. Try and get a metaphor of it. Wait like a seed waits.
Yeah. It's a rare, she's lucky. It's a rare lesson.
Yeah. And she's got, don't you think she got it?
Oh,
Really gets it? I think
she's living a whole new life. But that's another, this is what Rilke means when he says you must change your life. There's something about needing to see again and needing to understand what seeing and being seen is in that relationship. You know, my next poem is about changing your life. But
are you next?
Yeah,
we'll go. Let's do it.
Well, okay, yeah. All right. Well,
let's hear it.
You know, most of my life, I've thought of myself as a storyteller, a writer of narratives, whether I'm writing essays or poems. And so I'm deliberately reading poems today with you that are less involved with storytelling and more involved with something else. And this is the shortest of them. And
I love this one.
Yeah, I'm
We've
really,
had a lot of prayers today.
Yeah,
Prayer
well,
yeah.
What is prayer?
Yeah.
I mean, what
sacred.
The great Australian poet who was born an Englishman and now lives in America, Kevin Hart, H-A-R-T. He is a great poet. He was at the Westchester Conference
He
once.
came once, yeah.
And when asked to describe what prayer was, he sat back in his chair and opened himself up like this. He said, that's what prayer is. And I've never been able to forget that, right?
That's great.
Opened himself up. So when I began to change my life, when I met Chrissy and decided that I wanted to live an authentic life and I wanted her, I wanted to be
lucky me.
You know, lucky yeah. But she represents something that leaves me in awe. I think she's the best poet I've ever met. And,
here we go.
And anyway, we won't go on. But it's
lovely.
It's the thing that was remarkable was that I would meet people who would immediately accept us, who would say, Dave, I love you, I must love her too, right? And then I would meet people who would reject us and who would just close off and say, judgmental people, you know? And that's a telling thing. There's a telling thing about life. You want to go with the people who are like this, right? You don't want to go with the people who are like this.
Yeah, the people who let you move, the people who let you change, who go with it with you.
Let you live your life. So I was lying up in a meadow in Washington State, and I wrote this little poem. You know what, Al? I'm going to say this twice because it's so short.
I was going to ask you to repeat it anyway, so please do.
Yeah. Lopsided prayer. Blue joint fescue. Foxglove. Bee-sipped daisies. Sign to the breeze what its direction is. The night bleeds into everything you see. Oh, please be you, and please let me be me. Blue
again.
Fescue, foxglove, bee-sipped daisies, sign to the breeze what its direction is. The night bleeds into everything you see. Oh, please be you, and please let me be me.
Well, I don't know what's lopsided about it, but that last line says so much.
Yeah,
doesn't it?
I don't know what's lopsided about it either. For some reason at
But
the time, I thought,
I love that
Yeah,
word though,
lopsided.
lopsided. It's all lopsided. It's
Yeah.
just it's not straight and regular. It's got a different skewed.
and the flowers
vision.
are going, the weeds.
Yeah,
are
the
going
weeds like that.
this.
They're going like that. But is that not the most heartfelt thing that any of us feel from when we're children? Please be you and please let me be me. There's that lack of falseness in that. Please be you so I can know you and trust you and feel, and let me be me. And it's simple as that.
Yeah, what it is it's the feeling that every person has throughout her or his life, put into the clearest, simplest words.
Yes, very simplest words.
It's the most, it's a great reminder that the deepest feelings are the ones that are the most common, because
Yes.
we all share them.
Yeah.
And in one way or another, people either get to the point in their lives where they're able to say that last line to someone else, or they never reach that point, and they can never have fulfilled lives. And there are plenty of people who can never get to that simple point of honesty, because they have too many layers of glue around their hearts. And I pity people who can't come to that last line, but there's no way to improve on that last line. It's a very deep and profound statement of the human experience. That's what it is. You can't say it no better, as we would say in the blues world.
I agree. Yeah, that need to please, so that you're not being you. You're constantly.
We've got so many ways to run away from those two statements.
Exactly.
So many ways.
So many ways.
You know, it's the other thing is that just the courage required. In that last line.
Exactly.
And that's another thing. That's one of the things I really love about it, because it's only very rarely that I read a line of poetry that I really feel took courage to express, that you couldn't have thought to say it unless you'd lived to a certain point. And you couldn't have allowed yourself to say it unless you were courageous enough to do that. So that there's so much going on in I mean, I salute you. I'm glad that at whatever point you were at in your life before you wrote this, I'm glad you got to this.
Me too. Me too.
Couldn't have got there without her, I'll tell you that.
It's wonderful. Yeah.
You know, just one last note, which is since Chrissy brought up D.H. Lawrence, this is other people are judgmental of D.H. Lawrence without understanding how rich a writer he was. And now that I think that's changing. But I want to recommend to all your listeners, if we're talking about nature, an essay by Lawrence. It's a short essay, but it's one of the most perfect statements I have ever read about being in relation to the natural world, particularly to a tree he loved in New Mexico. And the essay is called Pan in America. And if you find a book called Life with a Capital L, which is an edition of Lawrence's essays by Jeff Dyer, the wonderful English writer, you'll find the essay there, Pan in America. I strongly recommend it. It's one of the best. It's a great statement of an environmentalist position, but it's deeper than a lot of environmentalism is, because it's also mythic and religious et cetera, et cetera.
Mm.
But it relates to this topic we've been talking about here today.
Mm.
And
Great.
Lawrence is a writer who gets judged and dismissed unfairly, I think.
Excellent. I've written it down, and so may others too. I'm going to close the proceedings with my last offering here, and this is this kind of pulls together when I said that I'm in nature and nature is in me. So this is a very extended metaphor in which I identify with not any kind of tree, but a fruit tree. And because I taught adolescents for so long who were trying to understand their own nature and who they were and who they could be, and looking around them and saying, I'm not like these other people. Who am I? What am I like? All of that has been placed into this metaphor. It's called the tree that didn't know it was a fruit tree. And here's where I get narrative, because like you, Dave, I think of myself as a storyteller too. So here's the story. The tree that didn't know it was a fruit tree grew up in a grove of evergreens, shy about the shaping of its leaves, unneedle-like, and shocked to see them fall in that first season and to stand denuded, open to the winter wind, surrounded by pines and firs, secure and durable, cloaked in close green with silver underneath. Flush in the spring, astonished by its budding, the new growth answers with a brighter shade the somber questions coloring its neighbors. Then, taken unawares by blossoming and gaping at its petals, pink and white, it keeps a secret in the mystery of pollen to be visited by bees who find their way to it unerringly, to share that secret in a distant place. It marvels as a different change ensues from pollinated blossom into fruit, which swells and ripens through to harvest time. What is this crop that bumps against the carpet of crackling brown and settles down upon the layered needles of the forest floor? It doesn't understand the rot that follows, the role that beauty plays, the ripening into a sweetness, why they had to die to make way for new life. Among its neighbors, alien and ill-equipped to know its mission while it thinks itself alone, it stands as animals approach and nibble at its gifts to leave the bitten cores behind. Ahead, the sight of future orchards.
It's a beautiful.
That's the cycle.
Parable.
That's
Yeah.
the cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's a wonderful thing to show, as you said, teaching kids all those years. I mean, that feeling of being different, of the difference.
Yeah.
That's
Sometimes the difference is that you are different and you're going to make a difference.
Yeah. That's the thing about nature, isn't it? About being in the world, about leaving the house, if we call what we know the house, and stepping out into the world, is that what you do, your eye grows, the eye grows, because first of all, everything sort of looks the same, and then you start to differentiate and you start to understand that everything is different, that there's difference everywhere. And then you start to see that in our differences, we make a kind of beautiful pattern.
Yeah.
A beautiful pattern. And
yeah, if you learn it first from nature, then you've got a chance to see that it applies to us and that we are nature, and that it is our differences that that are our glories.
Yes. Yeah.
So
I mean,
I always say, where if you're a creator, if you're an artist of some kind, what you have is the gift of bringing something out from the things that you've experienced, good and bad things, all the things that other people also feel but can't express.
Yeah.
And so how lucky we are that we can pull something out of ourselves and bring it into the world that maybe somebody who can't articulate her or his state can have it, ring in them a little bit and have them feel. Certainly the way that I grew to understand my connection to other people was as much through the art that other people produced.
Fantastic.
That you know what I'm saying?
I was just listening to a conversation on YouTube between the wonderful writer John Berger and the critic Michael Silverblatt. They're meeting at John Berger's house in France, and the two men are across a narrow table, and they're looking face to face and just talking about what books have meant to them in their lives. And John Berger says, they teach you how to be a person, and what being a person is. It's not a moral thing. It's not that you learn correct behavior from reading a book. That's not it. It's that you learn that you are one of those. You are one of those creatures who does that, who behaves like that, or who might behave like that, or who might have experiences like that.
Yeah, and
you learn
and across
relatedness,
across cultures, centuries. To feel those connections and realize that that there are great expressions of the human experience from all periods of history, from all peoples on the earth. I can't understand how it's possible to overlook anyone on the basis that somehow they're not as much as you might be.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we've had a lot of rain lately, and a puddle is just as awesome to me as an ocean.
Yes, but you don't want to lose that. I mean, it's great. It's great that you feel that way, and it's something that if we have it, we don't want to give it up. We don't want to lose it, because I think it's simply a deeper understanding of what it means to be real, and to be alive. And when you start, not seeing what's unique about the everyday, you start losing touch with, who you are and who you can be. So, hang on. Well, judging from what we've seen of your propensities, Trissy, you got a hold of that rope. You're not letting go of that rope.
No, they're not going to yank that out of my hands, Al. Don't worry.
Well, listen. I knew this was going to be fun, and every time I do one of these shows, it's like a chemical reaction. The people are always different, but they always bring something to it. And this has been great.
It's fantastic that you're doing these. It's a really special thing.
It's really good of you to do it.
Yeah, it's been just wonderful. Could go on for hours. We could just go twisting through and getting tangled up, and it would be just great.
Well,
so,
this is a good one. It's a good one. So I mean, thank you so much for being guests, and whoever invented the technology that made this possible, I'm in her or his debt.
Bless them for that.
Yeah.
And Al, I love you.
Part of human nature. Even technology is nature.
Dave, thank you very much. I love you too, and I will not forget that you were my first You're my first workshop leader at Westchester.
Wow.
That was a I felt like Ted Williams at his first spring training. Do you know the story about that? This is where I'm going to tie up. I'm going to tie up the show with this story because it's a baseball story, and I love baseball.
Yeah.
So he comes up, and in his first spring training with the Red Sox in 1939, the team was not particularly good, but they had one of the great sluggers and one of the great hitters in either league in Jimmy Fox. He was like the great slugging star of the team. And so spring training begins, and Williams is a kid of 21, and they get ready to go out and take batting practice. And one of the other rookies says to him, "Wait till you see Fox hit." And Williams says, "Wait till Fox sees me hit."
Yeah.
Great.
So when you tell, and I've heard you tell the story, you know, of that workshop, and when you described me, and you were generous enough to do it in front of me, which I really appreciated. You said that I came into your workshop with attitude. Well, that was the attitude.
That's where it came from. That's a good one, Al. Yeah.
So
great.
Once again, thank you very much.
Gotta love musicians, I said, you know.
Is that what you said in the workshop?
No, but that's what I'm saying.
You're telling him now.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
They bring a different attitude. Yeah.
Yeah, it helps.
Bring the attitude, Al. Bring the
So
attitude.
I don't know on what day we will all meet again in person, but I look forward to that day. That'll be wonderful.
Yeah.
So,
All
right, thank you very much.
Yeah, take good care of yourself, man.
I'm gonna
Yes.
I'm gonna go as long as I'm gonna go as long as my energy and my health lets me. So
Well
the
done.
same to you. You're living in a world I couldn't imagine. So I'm glad that you describe it.
Yeah, and we feel blessed, and we feel like this is part of our job too, is to really live here. Given how blessed we are to be here, we need to really be here and not feel guilty about being here or you know, dread. I mean, the best way we can give thanks is to really be here and celebrate and give.
Well, you're the advanced scouts, you know, like you've gone out far ahead of most of the rest of us in the column, and you're sending word back of what's out there. So
it is. We live in a piece of land that's like the prow of a ship. It feels like we're facing the unknown. We're going into the Southern Ocean.
Antarctica's right.
There's nothing there in front of us. We're up in the ship, and we're going into the unknown.
Well, keep at it. I'll keep at my end.
Keep listening to the birds, Al. Keep writing that bird music.
Will do. Okay, farewell.
Farewell.
Be
Bye,
careful
Al.
if you can't be good.
Yeah. Bye.
So long.